Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us today for an MP webinar on employee retention and burnout prevention strategies in a pandemic workforce. I'm Amy Lehman, Head of Marketing here at MP. For those of you joining us on a webinar for the first time, MP is a full-service human capital management company, offering a suite of products and services, including HR, payroll, benefits administration, time and attendance, and compliance assistance. We support our clients with cutting-edge technical solutions, as well as proactive, reliable service and deep HR and payroll expertise. At MP, we are wired for HR, and we help our clients succeed by aligning their HR strategy with their business goals. I am thrilled to introduce your presenter for today, corporate behavioral specialist and founder and president of Empower Behavioral Services, Taryn Abrahams. Taryn has over 22 years of experience as a psychotherapist and corporate coach. Empower Behavioral Services is a full-service consulting and training company focused on helping businesses strengthen interpersonal relations. Through the company's innovative consulting and training workshops, corporate teams, managers, and human resource executives are educated and empowered to manage and lead with confidence, determination, understanding, and finesse. Workshops cover a variety of areas, including diversity training, communications training, and unconscious bias training, with a focus on authentic employee interactions. EBS's mission: to bring out the best in management and staff so that everyone feels respected, valued, and protected. Just a quick reminder, this training is intended for educational and informational purposes. And while we hope you learn a lot today, we are not attorneys and the information should not be construed as legal advice. If you'd like to submit a question during the webinar, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. And just a reminder that a recording of the webinar will be sent out later today following the presentation, along with the slides. And with that, I'm going to hand the mic off to Taryn.
Well, thank you so much, Amy, and thank you so much for MP Wired HR. I'm really thrilled to be a part of this presentation, and I'm excited to deliver this, what I hope to be impactful information. What I have planned to talk about today is we're going to talk about really some strategies for identifying burnout, managing burnout, and really truly bringing out the best in our remote workforce. We're going to talk about this new normal, this pivot that we've heard of many times over the last year. We're going to talk about and we're going to unpack how to identify and define and identify burnout. We're going to talk about how to effectively manage it if you start to see some of those burnout symptoms within your employees or perhaps within yourself as a leader. We're going to talk about creative engagement strategies and also some strategies for increasing morale. There's some really simple, very inexpensive, if not even free ways to really engage your audience. And we're also going to talk about perhaps a call to action. I always say information is power, knowledge is power, but it's what you do with it. And I hope that by the end of today's meeting, you can all sort of self-reflect in terms of choosing one thing that you can maybe do differently moving forward to create a positive outcome. So again, I'm excited to be here. So let's talk about where we are today. This crazed brain. A lot of us, including leaders on this call, are not feeling as sharp as I usually do when I was in the office. I find I have less and less time for myself than ever before. Why am I feeling exhausted from 2020? Perhaps some of us wake up feeling like we didn't even sleep the night before. A lot of us are feeling burnt out. And this certainly does not help us. And it leaves us feeling this way, by the way, this sad face, right? It leaves us feeling depleted. And it really doesn't help us when we have other responsibilities within our home. Perhaps we're taking care of elders or loved ones. Perhaps our children are still not back at school. Also, to add to that, deadlines for work, projects, expectations. So it goes without saying that we are living in challenging times. You know, it's interesting. Many of us have heard this in the last year, this term pivot or this new normal. I love this slide because it really kind of paints a picture in terms of what it's like to work from home right now. We are managing both our personal and our professional lives in the same environment. And what's really interesting about this is before the pandemic, I think a lot of us used to fantasize about what it would be like to work from home. We all kind of craved that, right? And now that a lot of us have that, we're starting to find that we're burnt out, that it's maybe not as glamorous as we thought it would be. And one of the most leading contributing factors to burnout is that feeling of always being on. And if you look at this slide, there's a lot going on in our lives, especially if we are caretakers, right? Especially if we have children or we live with other generations within our homes. So I thought this was an interesting study that was done by the World Health Organization back in 2019. This was actually done prior to the pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, 36% of people said they suffered from burnout every week. And now it is estimated that over 50% of people are feeling burnt out. And I have to say that number sounds a little low. I think a lot of us, including myself, are finding ourselves a little bit burnt out, right? Waking up feeling tired, not feeling refreshed. We're spending a lot of time on video, more than we ever did before. So I have to say that that number could be even higher. 40% of people are experiencing anxiety, 44% are experiencing exhaustion, 56% are experiencing stress. Whoops. And people that are at highest risk of burnout would be people that have multiple roles or multiple jobs. And I don't mean necessarily W-2 jobs. I mean wearing multiple hats, working parents, people that have multiple jobs. Perhaps they are a parent. They're also acting the role as a teacher if their children are not back in school yet, taking care of elders or loved ones. Burnout really is at an all-time high. But there's good news here, right? For those of us on the call that are leaders, whether you're an HR manager, someone in the C-suite, you hold tremendous power in terms of employee performance and also employee morale. You truly are the front lines when it comes to managing employee performance. And as much as we have been inundated and we've had to pivot and we've been thrusted into this new normal, there's actually a lot of statistics and studies that will validate that productivity is actually up. And there are a lot of companies out there that are doing it very successfully, working remote, having their workforce work remote, and they are doing some really creative things to engage, keep people connected, keep people's morale up. So the good news is the power lies within all of you. That's the good news, right? So when we talk about leading during uncertain times, again, you hold a lot of power. How you as leaders approach this situation has a very big impact on how your employees are going to approach uncertain times. As a leader, if you tend to be someone that's not good with change, if you are struggling to pivot, if you consider yourself to have low resilience, it's something to reflect on because your morale impacts those that you lead. So there are 4 steps that I kind of wanted to break down, 4 suggestions, if you will, in terms of leaders leading during uncertain times. The first part is information. I always say knowledge is power. And especially during uncertain times, people have a craving for more information, which really puts the ownership on leadership to provide honest, transparent communication. Now, the key word I said there is honest. It's very easy to sugarcoat things, to make things seem like everything's okay. But really effective leadership is not always about sugarcoating. It's about being real and authentic. And I think that employees really respect that when they are led with authenticity and honesty. People see through leaders that aren't being honest and authentic. And so a tip that I have for that is communicate frequently. The risk of over-communicating is far less important than leaving the field open to catastrophic rumors. The less communication that we create, or the less communication we do or have, the more people will be forced to fill in the gaps. That's where rumors can start. That's where incorrect information can be created. And so it's important to be transparent. and inform people as much as possible. Embrace humility. Tell the truth. If you as a leader are maybe not in the right frame of mind, or you might be struggling with this new normal, be honest about that. It's interesting because a lot of people think, well, leaders need to be strong and they need to be, they can't show, their vulnerability. But we're starting to find that leaders that are able to show up authentically bring out the best in their employees, because then their employees are able to be authentic with them in return. And now we're having a real conversation, right? The second one is connect. It's really important to generate a feeling of trust with your employees. Trust is truly the foundation of every relationship, whether it's personal or professional. This does not happen from your communications. This will not happen if your communications appear remote or artificial. People need to feel highly personal and their presence and their connection. Senior executives who reach out to their employees and foster a warmth and support are able to seek reassurance and gain credibility with their employees. On the personal side, leaders need to also acknowledge that they too may be affected by this burnout, right? So there is that authenticity again. And admitting things is not a sign of weakness. On the contrary, it signals that they are in touch with their own feelings and with others as fellow human beings. There's a lot of power behind that. Everyone, including senior executives, may need to seek additional support, whether it's from friends, family members, mentors, or even a counselor or a therapist. A tip to stay connected would be, if and when dramatic events occur, give people the opportunity to safely encourage and to express their emotions. Reach out to employees on a personal basis, not just about their output, not just about the work that's at hand, but also just touching base with, hey, how's it going? How are you doing? How's the family? Is there anything that you need? Be there for them. Encourage everyone to do the same. And I have to tell you, I was reading an article recently and they were talking about what are the biggest factors that motivate employees, and it's not always money. It's not always monetary. Oftentimes it comes from that human connection. So the next step is to guide. More than any other time, especially during periods of uncertainty, people want strong leaders who are comfortable giving direction on what to do and what not to do. They need guidance. They also need sort of rules of engagements. How do I run my meetings now? Should everything be a video call? How often should I connect with my manager? These things seem super obvious, but when we're living in uncertain times, those questions might be hard to answer. So you may benefit to start from just focusing on the basic elements. Provide clear guidance, critical priorities that everyone can rally around and contribute to. And a tip for that would be, give steady guidance. Focus on the concrete steps on which all employees can align with. Empower them to be part of the solution within that framework. Patiently hammer your message. Its stability may be important, may be more important than its content. So stability is important. And the next part is unite. It goes without saying that one of the things that I think we learned the most during this pandemic is that we truly are social beings. Some of us may consider ourselves to be introverts, and we seem to love this new normal, but many of us are social beings, and we really crave that interaction and that connection. And especially during uncertain times, it's important to maintain that connection. People truly value that. We need to rally behind them and really create opportunities to connect. And it shouldn't just be about work, right? And we're going to talk about that in a few slides. There's a lot of really creative ways to bring people together over technology that can bring fun, that can bring that team cohesion that we're all looking for. The interesting thing is, in the last 4 years, the search term sense of belonging went up 140%. So regardless of generation, regardless of cultural background or gender, there is this overall desire for a sense of belonging. And I think leaders that are able to recognize that are the ones that are truly able to bring the best out in their employees. A tip for that can be celebrate who you are as a business community. Emphasize connectedness to your industry, your company, your customers, and also one another. Encourage people to have sessions with each other, with other employees, not so much always about work, but encourage them to stay connected. So when we talk about burnout, who's at risk? Quite frankly, I think we are all at risk, right? But the people that are at most risk are leaders, because not only are we there to take care of our employees, but we're also taking care of ourselves. We have to manage, we have to lead, and that can oftentimes lead to feelings of burnout, though that multi-level of responsibility. Employees who are caretakers, again, wearing multiple hats, multiple jobs, are very high risk of burnout. Anyone that's ever felt burnout before, or perhaps consider themselves to be poor stress managers, can actually be at elevated risk of burnout. People who are strivers, right? People that struggle to find that balance. Yes, people that bring on, yes, I will do that, bring on more work, and struggle to say no are also ones that can be potentially at risk of burnout. So for us leaders on the call, it's really, that employee that you go to all the time to get that work done, be mindful of that. Even though they're saying yes, it might be a sign that they don't know how to say no. So really make sure that you balance that delegation and not just to the ones that are overperformers, because eventually, that's another article I read the other day, overperformers and strivers they do also tend to put in their resignation notice. So don't be surprised if you have people on your team that are strivers that get the work done that end up resigning. We are starting to see more and more of that lately because of their inabilities to say no. So a good best practice might be, are you sure you can take this on? You can tell me no. Maybe giving them the permission to say no if that's what they need to say. Caring people that have high levels of empathy, tend to internalize and absorb the feelings of others, may also be at very high risk of burnout. And obviously people working multiple jobs. So as leaders, what can we do about this, right? And I really think there's this 3-step process. The first step is recognizing, right? We first have to diagnose and recognize what's in front of us. So watch out for those signs of burnout. We're going to go into that in the next slide. The next would be to undo the damage, right? So reverse what you see, seek support, help them to manage the stress. And we're going to talk about ways to do that as well. And then the goal is to long-term create a setting, a work environment that's going to build success long-term. What's going to help this individual or team build resilience? And by the way, for those of us on the call that tends to kind of label ourselves as not very resilient people, resilience is something that can be harnessed, it can be practiced, it can be nurtured. So that's the good news, is that with intention and with choice, you can actually become a more resilient person and you can help others become more resilient. So let's talk about the signs of burnout, right? This is by no means a complete list, but this will give you sort of paint that picture, if you will, in terms of being more mindful of some of the potential symptoms. There's physical symptoms, there's emotional symptoms, and there's behavioral symptoms. Not every person that's feeling burnout is going to have all of these signs or symptoms. It's going to be up to leadership to be able to have those conversations, ask those questions, be aware. And the only really way to do that is to have regular interaction with your employees. So physical signs, being very tired, drained all the time. If you hear your employees complaining about really being very tired, perhaps they don't turn their camera on as much anymore. Perhaps you find them yawning a lot on Zoom, right? Really good signs to be aware of. They may be calling out sick more. They may be complaining about more illness, more colds, more viruses. That might be a sign. If you hear them complaining about headaches or stomach issues, those are psychosomatic symptoms. Typically headaches and anything in the gut is connected to the brain, and the brain is where emotion starts. So if someone is complaining about chronic headaches or muscle pain, they may not even be aware that they may be feeling burnt out. But as a leader, you can open up that dialogue and say, hey, is everything okay? Are you feeling burnt out? Are you getting the satisfaction out of the work like you did before, right? Those are some really good questions to ask. Change in appetite or sleep habits. You may not know that about your employees, but again, through a dialogue, you can then start to uncover some of the things that they may be experiencing. Emotional signs. They may expressing a sense of failure or self-doubt. They may be expressing helplessness or feeling trapped. They may be showing signs of being very reactive. When maybe before, when you would give them assignment, they would, be all excited about it. You might be noticing that they may be reactive about it now. They may not be as enthusiastic about new projects. That could definitely be a sign of burnout. Being detached, feeling alone. If you're scheduling happy hour meetings or opportunities for team building and certain people aren't showing up, it's an opportunity for a dialogue, right? Loss of motivation, a cynical mindset. If people are showing real signs of being negative, this is never going to change. Everything stinks. Again, a red flag, and that's an opportunity to have a conversation. Some behavioral signs: withdrawing from responsibilities, maybe tardiness, maybe incomplete assignments, isolating from the team, procrastinating. Perhaps this was an employee that you never had to micromanage, and now you find that you have to constantly touch base with them. Where is the project? When are you going to get this in? That could be a sign of a burnout issue. If you may notice that someone is showing up looking haggard or intoxicated, for instance. Interestingly enough, alcohol sales is up 60% in this country. And it's not a surprise, right? Alcohol tends to be the things that we tend to grab towards when we need to cope. But unfortunately, it's a very slippery slope because alcohol is a depressant. And if we're struggling with anxiety, if we're struggling with feelings of burnout or even depression, alcohol has been known to make that worse. The drink going down feels good, and perhaps the buzz makes us feel temporarily better, but long-term impacts on the brain suggest that alcohol impacts and worsens anxiety and depression. So that's something that can, it's a fine line, right? We want to respect those employee boundaries, but at the same time, I believe as a leader, we have to sometimes be a detective, be mindful and aware of some of those signs. If you notice that your employee is just extremely reactionary, taking frustrations out on others, not really showing that team player effort, that could be a sign as well. Or just skipping work, taking lots of PTO, that could be a sign. So what we're really talking about here, and I had mentioned before that as leaders, you hold tremendous power. You hold a really interesting opportunity here to help employees as well as yourself become more resilient. And what is resilience? It's that yellow ball that bounces back in that picture. Resiliency is really adapting in the face of adversity. It's pivoting, right? That word that we hear all the time. It's about managing our minds in ways that increases our ability to anticipate and address events as they happen. Highly resilient people are able to find a way to change course and are able to emotionally heal and continue moving towards their goals. So, when we talk about resiliency, it's really a matter of having real conversations with our employees, right? I always say good leadership isn't just about focusing on the job at hand. It's focusing on the entire employee. So having conversations about how are things going on at home and, what is it that I can help you with and how are you feeling? It's interesting. Prior to the pandemic, talking about feelings was a little taboo, but I think we now recognize that we are all forced with very different challenges and very unique challenges. And there's this mantra that I hear all the time. We are all in this together, right? And truly, we really are. But as leaders, we need to remind ourselves that even though we're all in this together, doesn't mean that all of our individual experiences are the same. So it's really important to have those one-on-one conversations and not assume that they're doing maybe well as you are, right? when we talk about interpersonal skills, right, and we talk about a culture of an organization, I really have always felt that the number one most underrated life skill, both in personal and professional life, is listening. For someone to be able to sit down with someone, or even over a Zoom call or a phone call, and to actually listen to what this person is saying without an agenda, without trying to change them, there is so much power behind that. And so leaders that are able to sit down and have authentic conversations and to show up in a way where you are able to really, truly, actively listen, there's so much power there. Now, there are some key differences between listening and active listening. Listening is listening to the words. We all pretty much are good with that. Active listening is seeking to understand. And there's no way we can be active listeners if we have our phones in our hands, if we're multitasking, if we're looking at our computer and emailing at the same time. So it's really important that we show up with the right mindset, with an understanding that we need to seek full understanding. And active listening is also about paraphrasing. It's not about trying to change this person's mind. It's about empathizing and validating. And what's really fascinating about listening is when you can show up in the right way and you can truly connect with that person, oftentimes the problem that that person is having tends to dissipate because you showed up and you listened and you showed empathy. It's very powerful. So let's talk about ways to engage our remote employees. Perfect segue, right? Empathy. Showing up with empathy. Understanding that not everybody's situation is the same. Understanding that certain people might have certain fears that maybe you can't relate to, right? Having empathy, again, is about putting yourself in someone else's shoes and picturing what it might be like to be in their shoes and to not change it, but to honor it and respect it. There's a lot of power behind that. Again, as I mentioned before, we are truly all in this together, but that does not mean that all of our experiences are the same. So take the time to understand each individual employee's experience. It's worth the time to do that. You talk about engaging remote employees. That is a really, really great way to do that, is to take the time to have a one-on-one with them regularly, not just once a year, not just once a quarter, but schedule time. And it doesn't have to be a lot. It could be a 15-minute quick touch-base meeting. People appreciate that, right? Focus on the entire employee. Again, I had mentioned that before. Don't just focus on the output. Hey, did you get, when you call someone up, hey, did you get that assignment done? Of course, that's the goal of your conversation, but it is much more effective when you start the conversation with, hey, how's your day going? How's the family? Right? And then go into, hey, have you worked on that project? Or have you finished that task that I asked you to do last week? Right? People really, really appreciate that. Encourage people to take PTOs. These reasons, there's a number of reasons. One is, again, the leading contributing factor to burnout is always being on. Our work situation is totally different than it was before, right? It's just a different setup. So we have to respect that. And perhaps a way of honoring that is to encourage people to use their benefits, to use their PTO. If they start to feel burnt out, give them the permission, tell them it's okay to walk away and take a break in the middle of the day if you have to, or if you have to take a half day or a full day off, it's okay. I found myself feeling, I don't know, I'm sure a lot of us have felt this lately. There are times where I'm looking at my screen and I feel like I'm looking through my screen. If you start to notice that, or if you hear your employees expressing that, give them the permission to unplug for a little bit. And what I've done is when I start to notice that's happening within myself, I close my laptop, I put on my tennis shoes, and I take a walk outside. And even just doing it for 15 minutes just shifts my mindset. And then I come back and I'm able to do the work at hand. Sometimes it's better to just give in and give your employees the permission to do that. It will work out better in the long run than you just expecting them to work. Encourage that employees, recognize that employees wear many hats. Again, that kind of goes back to the empathy, right? Your situation may be one way, but that doesn't mean that everyone's situation is like your situation, right? So take the time to understand each individual employee's situation. You know, when it comes to having meetings, you know, there's a lot of ways we can do this. I do think video is great whenever possible. 55% of what we communicate is not out of our mouth, it's our body language. So when you have a video call, you get a lot more information, you get a lot more data when you're looking at someone. And when you're looking at someone, you can start to identify, how are they dressed? Do they look like they haven't showered? Do they look perhaps intoxicated? Do they look really sleep deprived? Those are certain things you wouldn't be able to pick up if you just did a phone call. The other thing too is you can't read affect, and it's hard to read emotion over the phone. It's much easier to decode that kind of stuff when you have a visual. So I encourage you to have, you know, video calls whenever possible. I also, when it comes to engaging remote employees, it's really easy when there's nothing to talk about to cancel team meetings. But I really challenge us leaders on the call to still have the meeting. Maybe the meeting won't be about work. Maybe you can surprise them with a team building activity, or let the team decide how they want to use that time, right? Stay connected. People need that more than ever before. Perhaps you may be feeling like you're doing them a favor by canceling an unnecessary meeting, but I see it as an opportunity to connect again with them. And what better way to do that, maybe when you have less to talk about work. Maybe you can connect on other levels, which again, deepens the relationship, increases the engagement, leads to higher morale, and leads to company loyalty, which is, I think, what we're all looking for. Be clear and intentional and transparent in your communication, as I had mentioned prior. Manage your burnout. You know, and I'm going to ask anybody on this call today, if you're feeling bold enough, please put in the chat, how are you feeling? You know, we have to be mindful that our leaders are also at risk for burnout. And so I encourage you, if you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling burnt out, if you're feeling like you're just not getting that satisfaction out of your work, figure out ways that you can better manage your burnout. And I always say that managing burnout isn't always about what you do at work. It's about what you do when work is over. And I think that because we are all home, it's very hard to create those boundaries between work and personal. Our office has become our home. So I am hearing lots of stories of people working until 11, 12, 1 in the morning, sending emails at crazy, crazy hours. And so if anyone is on this call and you are feeling burnt out, perhaps the first step is to reevaluate what you're doing on your time off. Are you allowing yourself to have time off? Are you allowing yourself to have joy in other areas of your life? Work is important, but it's not everything in our lives. And when we neglect the things that are important to us, like our hobbies and our interests, those are the things that can cause us to feel resentful, right? And be authentic, as I had mentioned before. You know, show up real. Show up. If you're feeling stressed out, it's not a bad thing to admit that to your team. I was on a call a couple of weeks ago. It was a networking call, and it was me and like 5 other people in the Zoom room. And everybody's going around the room and they're introducing themselves and we're talking about how we're doing, and everybody's saying the same thing. Oh, I'm doing well, I'm doing great. And I looked at them and I said, I don't know. You know, I'm having one of those days, you know, I'm feeling a little burnt out and I think I might need to take a little breather in a few hours. And it wasn't until I said that everybody else in the room was like, you know, I'm not sleeping lately. And I'm so glad you said that, because I've been feeling that too. So sometimes it just takes one person, maybe sometimes a leader, to be authentic and real, to then get others to open up in an authentic way. So what are some ways to boost morale? There are a lot of ways to do this, and there's some companies out there that are doing a really wonderful job. You don't have to spend a lot of money to engage people. Zoom Hangouts is a great opportunity to do that. I know a lot of companies are doing games, happy hours. I would really caution you, you don't want to do too many happy hours because again, alcohol is a depressant. But at the same time, if it's something that's once in a while, it's not going to hurt anyone, but it's something to be mindful of. We don't want to create too many activities around alcohol. Leverage technology and stay connected. There's some wonderful applications. There's one called Slack, where you can really stay connected. I'm hearing a lot of chatter actually about Slack. I don't know if anyone has used it. If you want to comment in the chat, I've heard some really wonderful things about that product. When you're doing activities, you want to make sure that you engage all of your employees. If you have people that are now back in the office, you want to make sure that you include them. If they choose not to show up, that's their choice, but you never want people to feel discluded. Work on improving your own morale. I know that sounds really crazy, but you hold a lot of power and you all set the tone for how people feel at your work. So if you're struggling with your own morale, I encourage you to take a pause and figure out how you can bounce back, how you can build up your resiliency. There's one thing that we all love, and that is reviews, and we like feedback. And I encourage everyone to continue to deliver those employee reviews and that feedback. People like that transparency. They want to know how they're doing, especially in uncertain times. The more you can communicate how people are performing, the better off they will be because they know where they stand, they know where they can improve, and they know they just are in the now. They're in the know, right? With that said, also taking the time to show recognition, especially during these uncertain times. I think people are always open to an ego stroke, right? And it's that feel-good chemical when you can show people that the acknowledgement that you're doing good work, that will transform into more good work. There's really some magic that happens when you put yourself out there and you show recognition. And it doesn't have to be formal recognition. It could just be, hey, I'm really proud of how you handled that report last week. I know you had a lot on your plate, and I'm just giving you recognition that was really well done. Done. Simple as that. You've acknowledged it. You also empathize that you know that they have a lot on their plate. And that's the stuff that employees want more of. When they get a piece of that, they will go above and beyond to get more of that. Keep the company's vision and message clear at all times, right? Again, it's that transparent communication. Talk about where the company is going. Talk about the plans for the organization. People like to be in the know. Ask for feedback, right? Very important. As leaders, we understand the power and the value of giving feedback to your employees, but ask them to give feedback back to you, right? Reciprocal feedback. To me, that is called a dialogue, right? It shouldn't just be about the employee's performance, but it should also be about, what can I do as a leader or a manager or an HR professional to make this a better work experience for you? Even if they have nothing to say in the moment, you putting that out there and planting that seed just shows them that this is a two-way conversation, right? And there's a lot of value behind that. And show how much you care. I know that sounds really simple and super basic, but there are some very simple ways that you can show care. You can do it through an email. You can do it through a text. You can do it through acknowledgement in a group setting. I know companies are doing some really creative things where they're sending out like fruit baskets and chocolates to remote employees. And there's some wonderful marketing companies out there that are doing a really good job of putting together some really nice things for employees. So if you're not doing that, that might be really an area of opportunity. I always say burnout is a sign that something needs to change. Right? So it's an area of opportunity. It's a time for reflection. And so if you feel that you personally are struggling from burnout, or if you notice burnout signs within your employees, it's time to take a pause and face it head on. You don't want to ignore it because it can turn into an ugly cancer, and that can lead to resignations. That can, even worse than a resignation, is a disengaged employee. And what is a disengaged employee? Somebody that shows up and really doesn't have the energy or the oomph to do what's at hand. Basically a walking head, right? And we certainly don't want that. Gallup came up with some wonderful statistics. They talk about the price of a disengaged employee. It's costly. It's extremely costly. So to be proactive is much less expensive than being reactive and watching people leave. So I always say, if you feel like people are burnt out, it's a time to do something different. And it doesn't have to be anything big. So I ask everybody on this call, questions, concerns, comments. I want to hear from you. You know, I always say, this is my favorite saying by Albert Einstein: the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Small changes make a huge impact. What small change are you willing to explore or implement today? So I see someone commented in the chat. So Megan Hops, she uses Slack. It's great. You can use a phone and screen share as well. It's a great tool. I've heard great things about Slack. So I also see someone commented, I love my job, but being remote and being in a high position is making it hard to turn off. I have to force myself to unplug. It's a choice, right? And sometimes it requires us to have a conversation with ourselves. Sometimes we can be our worst enemy. When we're under stress, we tend to put more stress onto ourselves. We tend to maybe put unrealistic expectations. Our life requires balance. When we don't take care of our personal stuff, when we don't feel like we're living life fully, it starts to wear on us. And so I hear what you're saying about having a high position, but it's a good thing to model to your employees that it's okay to shut off. It's okay to shut off. You know, I have many clients that always ask me, is it okay to send an email late at night? I caution people to do that. Even if you write in the email, don't feel the need to respond right away. People are checking their emails. People check their emails all day long. So one gift you can give your employees is to let them know that I'm only going to be sending emails from this time to this time. And unless it's an emergency, and by the way, this is what qualifies as an emergency, you're not going to hear from me on the weekends and evenings anymore. And I think that's a gift that a leader can give an employee, because then employees will say, okay, well, if my leader is setting those boundaries, then I need to honor those boundaries within myself. And that is a really good thing and a healthy thing to model. So Kim asks a question: how do you handle an HR office manager that is supposed to be the person that is handling employee engagement and they appear to be exhibiting burnout? Not uncommon, Kim, unfortunately. And it could be a conversation to have with this person in terms of the impact that this person's burnout may have on others. This person has a job to do. And I always say we all impact each other. My morale affects my clients and my family, and same thing within a company, right? So it sounds like an opportunity for a conversation, and it might sound like, hey, is everything okay? I've been a little worried about you, right? We don't want to be accusatory. We don't want to point fingers. We want to show up with our heart. That is the best opportunity to have a real dialogue and to minimize the chance of someone becoming reactive. You know, just say, you know, is everything okay? I noticed a change in you since the pandemic. Can we talk about this, right? And that can go two different ways. Hopefully they will be open to saying, you know what, I'm really feeling overwhelmed. I feel inundated. I need help. Or they might get defensive and say, I don't know what you're talking about. And if that happens, you can simply say, well, you know, most of what we communicate is through our behaviors, and these are the things that I've been noticing. Can we have a real conversation about this? And hopefully this person will honor that and open up. Great question, Kim. So what other questions do we have? I hope this was helpful. Please comment in the chat. Was this helpful? What's the one takeaway that you got from today that you'd be willing to implement or try? So another comment came through by Gambensky, Michael. It's definitely been a busy time with pressure to qualify and receive federal and state stimulus for organizations on top of one's normal responsibilities. As you said, our normal routines have changed both at the office and at home. Great presentation. Well, thanks, Mike. That's great. That's great feedback. Cindy asks, how you can help someone who won't cut back their hours? Ooh. So you've had the talk with them that they're overworking and they're just not going to cut back their hours. Well, that goes back to the original conversation. We can't change others. We can just change how we respond to others. So you can plant those seeds and you can have those conversations, but at the end of the day, people will do what they feel is best for themselves. Some of us have thrown ourselves into work more because that's our way of coping with stress. That is a very normal reaction to stress, but it's not sustainable. So you can say what you can in the most compassionate way, but you might have to leave that person where they are for right now. And to make sure that you don't enable that behavior. So if they decide to send emails out at 2, 3 in the morning, be mindful not to respond to those until you are ready to respond to them. That's the power that you have within that situation. I hope that's helpful. We can't change others, unfortunately. I still haven't found that magic wand yet. But what I do know is that we can change the way we respond to them, and we can shift their own behavior so that we don't enable that behavior. So another, thank you, great compliment on my presentation. I appreciate that. Much of what was covered is good practices in and out of uncertain times. How would you set realistic expectations for the person implementing these practices if they weren't already in place pre-pandemic? I'm not sure if I understand the question. How would you set realistic expectations for the person implementing these practices? Well, again, it can't just come from one conversation. This is a process. This is a journey. We're all in this journey together. So things that you've put in place may have to be tweaked, may have to be changed, may have to be renegotiated. Our rules of engagement are different now than they were before. Our lives are different, right? But I have to say, and I want to end this on a positive note, I look at this pandemic as a wonderful thing, actually, a wonderful opportunity. Personally, I have spent more time with my 17-year-old than I ever have before. I have been able to start writing a book. I've had free time to do that. I've been able to nurture the relationships more in my personal life. And I, as the world is starting to open up and people are becoming vaccinated and things are starting to open up, I'm so excited to see the books that people write and the screenplays and the things that they have created. Remember, through disruption comes innovation. There's a lot of good that's going to come out of this, and I can't wait to see that, right? So Michael says, trying to identify what is absolutely necessary and what work can be deferred to a less busy time or eliminated is helpful. Yes, prioritizing is very key skill right now. Also, not taking everything on yourself, but getting your coworkers help to lessen the stress. Because our lives are different and our workflow is different, or the way we do work is different, we have to change the process as well, right? So that might be delegating more. That might be asking for help more. Maybe in the past we were able to get it done, but now maybe we need that help, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. So any other questions or comments? So Kim says, what do you do if you have someone who wants to cut back days or hours? Great question. Great question. And I think as a leader, we have to stand firm, 2 feet on the ground, and really resist the urge to be reactive about this and become a detective about this. Sit down with this person over Zoom or a video call. Make sure it's a video call so that you can gain all the information, the body language and everything. And ask them what's driving this decision. Is everything okay? is there anything that we can do as your employer to alleviate some of these issues that are causing you to have to cut back? Right? It could be a childcare issue. It could be a variety of issues, right? So resist the urge to become reactive and lead with compassion and really try to find out what's going on with this individual. And remember that everyone's situation is unique. So there may be things going on with this person that you may be completely unaware of. In terms of people who have been affected by the pandemic, I know women more than anyone else has been affected. A lot of women were forced to cut back their hours, resign, because of having to take care of children and homeschooling and all that kind of stuff. So I think the conversation should really focus on how can we help you? And it also might be an opportunity to reiterate the value that you feel within this employee, how much we value you, how much we need you, and what can we do to make this right for you. At the end of the day, people are going to make the decisions that are right for them. Not necessarily a bad thing, maybe an opportunity to bring in new talent, right? But we have to honor the people's needs. But it does require a conversation. As a follow-up, we are a small business and they are also requested to keep all the benefits of full-time employees. How do you address this? To keep all the benefits of full-time employees. I'm not sure I understand the question. As a follow-up, we are a small business and they are also requested to keep all the benefits of full-time employees.
So Taryn, it's Amy. I think that they're stating that, they're going to work part-time hours and usually you need to work full-time.
Oh, I see. And then they want full-time benefits.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, that's a challenging one, but at the same time, certain benefits are for full-time employees and, part-time employees don't get the same benefits, right? That's just standard. So again, I think the conversation should be more about what's driving this decision. What do they need from you? And if they give you pushback and they need full benefits, that might be a tough conversation, but that might require the leader to say, maybe no, I don't, that's a question actually, maybe for your employment attorney, actually, that might be a really good question for your attorney. I don't know if I could give the right advice on that one. Yeah. Well, I thank everybody. This was a wonderful opportunity. I hope this information was helpful. As Amy mentioned, I offer coaching, consulting, and training to help companies strengthen business culture, especially in this remote work that we're in. I offer a free consultation. If you'd like to reach out to me, I'd be happy to offer you some insights and help talk in terms of how my firm can help you navigate through these challenging times. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And I'll pass that back to you.
Fantastic. That fantastic webinar. Thank you all for attending. We hope you came away with some helpful information and strategies for preventing employee burnout. I know I did. I do want to quickly remind everyone that a link will be sent out of the recording later this afternoon. And if you have any further questions, please send them to mp marketing@mp-hr.com. And also, our MP's HR team is here to assist with any questions you may have as well. Thank you all for joining us and have a great rest of your day. Bye, everyone.